What's up, PT people? Welcome to another episode of whatever that we're going to call this. I don't know what we're going to call it, but we're going to review some articles here. They're ones that I've already posted and read the abstracts of, but we have Dr. Stephen on the other end of the call today, fresh from a bike ride, which is he actually has set on his background right now. Looks like it was a bit of an overcast day over the beach.
Yeah.
How was your ride?
Good to get some fresh air.
Good. Yeah. Fresh air is always needed. All right. So the first article we're going to talk about, or the first abstract, which I want to touch on one thing. I've been reviewing abstracts recently, but we're going to switch to full articles, and I'm going to present those at the beginning of each week so everybody who watches this can comment below on their thoughts or questions on the article. And then when we have these one-on-ones, we will try and answer as many questions as we can. Steve, how long have you been a physical therapist for? Give us a little introduction.
Yeah, Brian first pinned me when we were 4 years old practicing wrestling, and been friends ever since. But professionally, we both went to Misericordia for PT school up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and then up in Nepa way, and been practicing primarily outpatient orthopedic PT for it'll be 10 years in June. So did some hospital, did some home care along the way. But always had a passion towards overhead athletes, so kind of got me to begin with.
And you pitched in college?
Yeah, threw some innings up there for the Cougars. Yeah.
So you've got some high-level experience behind you. I had the pleasure of being on the other end of Steve's pitches throughout high school for a couple years.
Yeah, we were battery mates there. That's right.
Yep. All right. So we'll go ahead and get into the first article here. And that one's the article titled The Relationship Between Grip and Pinch Strength and Pitch Type in High School Pitchers with and Without Elbow Symptoms. So, Steve, what were your first thoughts when you read this article?
I love the idea. I think it's interesting. It's something that's often included in training programs. Obviously, elbow is a hot joint with your overhead throwing athlete, and anything you can look at from a preventative standpoint, obviously very valuable. So, always good to look at the relationships and see what we could be doing.
Absolutely. And this one even went a little bit beyond that and said that the grip strength can be more helpful in specific pitches. And those pitches were the screwball and the forkball.
Yeah. Tough grips. Definitely your large-handed pitchers are going to be able to get these, but you're always worried about the relationships there and tension, on that flexor mass as far as and getting that wide grip. So I don't know. I never had the big enough hands to throw them, but we definitely had buddies that did, and they're nasty pitches. But you're always kind of worried about it, the stresses it's going to place on you. So
the forkball particularly is one that you would see people throw, just fly up in the air and go about 4 feet in front of them. So I could see how being able to work on the pinch and grip strength would certainly help there. So one of the ways that you can really work on that grip strength is with a sand bucket, which is probably the easiest way for most people and the cheapest way. Just find some sand. If you're near a beach, you can grab that. You can also grab it like your Home Depot, Lowe's. And there's also, in the physical therapy world, we also have Theraputty, which has, based on color, has different grades of resistance. So you could have a yellow to start with and progress to a red, a green, a blue, as you feel stronger, and just working it around and really working on that key palmar and pinch strength can certainly help you develop these pitches a little bit faster if you have some weak grips.
Yeah, I liked. You mentioned sand. Rice buckets are real popular too. Not only for grip, but further up the chain too. I know. We certainly played around with them for some tough activities as well.
I was talking to my cousin Eric Buckland, who pitched for University of Delaware, and we were kind of going back and forth on the difference between rice and sand. And right now, I told him that if he was to do this, I think a lot of people are going to be worried about hygiene. So if you use a rice bucket, you're going to be throwing that rice away all the time. It's going to be hard to kind of clean it because as soon as you add some water, it's just going to soften up. So I thought maybe sand would be better for now until these phobias kind of go away. Because you can always rinse that out, lay it out, let it dry out, and then throw it back in the bucket.
Yeah, good sustainability there.
Yeah. Save the rice for eating for now. All right. Any other thoughts you had on that article, or are we ready to move on?
That pretty much caps it. But particularly if you have the athletes you're working with that are interested in that grip or have the potential to maybe develop it, just further screening it out. And from the abstract, it seems like it's a good idea to work on that strength if that is the type of pitch you're going to be throwing. So.
And when you're looking at younger athletes who aren't only pitchers, but they also play shortstop or outfield, and they're hitting, there's a lot to be said for grip strength overall that's not touched on in this article. But when you squeeze something harder, you're usually able to kind of generate more from your central nervous system and produce more power. So even if it's in your torso or your shoulder that you're looking to recruit those muscles, usually when you just squeeze harder, you have that like overflow principle and can generate a little bit more force with that. So this isn't just for pitchers or even just for specific pitches. So if you don't throw a forkball or screwball, working on your grip strength could potentially increase your velocity as well.
Certainly be something interesting to look at.
Yeah. All right, we will move on to the next one right now. And the title of this one is The Comparison of Shoulder Range of Motion, Strength, and Upper Quarter Dynamic Balance between NCAA Division I overhead athletes with and without a history of shoulder injury. So I don't know about you, but I had never heard of the upper quarter Y balance test. Had you heard of it prior to this article?
No. I mean, had some buddies who like FMS type screenings, and definitely think there's a time and a place for them. Never thought about it for the overhead. So this was new to me, definitely.
And it's a pretty nice, easy system, it looks like, to make. Steve and I were talking earlier, and maybe we'll make our own. Rather than everybody spending $350, we can probably produce it a little bit cheaper and have our own version of it out there.
Yeah, I would think so.
So I think the main takeaway from this is there's definitely strong shoulder screens out there for overhead athletes. And overhead athlete, we're talking about baseball, softball, volleyball, tennis. A lot of people incorporate swimmers with those, but I've recently read a few articles that show that swimmers should not be in this group, so we'll kind of keep that out of this. But I think it's another easy test that has a strong inter and intra-rater reliability that you can incorporate into your overhead athlete screening to check to see if there's any deficits that you need to work on prior to them getting heavy into the season.
Yeah. Minutes to use the test. Good, reliable information you're getting from it. So, it seems like a no-brainer to go ahead and move forward with it.
Absolutely. When you were pitching in high school or college or at any level, did coaches or athletic trainers ever have you do a pre-screening prior to the season starting?
No, not. There was definitely a heavy emphasis on conditioning, but as far as screening, and not to the discredit to any of them, they were all wonderful. Yeah. But no, I mean, we were high school and then Division III, so I don't know, some of our guys that we grew up with and played, D1 ball. I don't know if they were working them in there or not.
And I mean, luckily as a physical therapist, going to school for physical therapy, you probably were well in tune with knowing how your body was doing and things to work on to avoid those injuries.
Wonderful professors.
Yeah.
My man Steve up there.
Steve Pheasant, Dr. Steve Pheasant.
Yeah, my main man. He was awesome as far as, I went to him and said, hey, Steve, what are things we should be hitting on? And he just drew up a great program. And our ATCs up there were awesome as far as getting us care if we needed it. But it was a lot of, secondary, tertiary type, not too much on the preventative side.
And that'll take us to our third and final article for today. Again, we're just going off the abstracts. So in the future episodes, we'll hopefully be diving a bit deeper into one or maybe two articles and answering any questions that you comment on below. The title of this article is Shoulder Pain and Rotational Range of Motion of the Trunk, Shoulder, and Hip in Baseball Players. So when I was reading the article in an earlier episode, I basically said, you can stop listening now. There's no clinical significance in this article. But I always like reading these because I think there are little nuggets you can kind of take away, even if they don't reach that threshold to be considered clinically significant. And this is one of those articles. So in the results section of this abstract, it says trunk rotational range of motion was greater in the pain group than the control group. But again, we didn't quite reach those degrees are required for it to be considered a clinically significant change. But I did think that it was something good to kind of touch on in this article. Now, the participants in this study, there was 95 adolescent baseball players, 60 with shoulder pain, 35 without. So usually adolescent, you're a little bit more loose in the joints. You're not going to lose a ton of flexibility, and it's not specific what these shoulder injuries are. So as we age or possibly develop more in-depth injuries like labral tears, rotator cuff issues, UCL issues, that might require a little bit more thoracic compensation if those joints aren't appropriately treated, which could lead to more clinically significant findings. What did you think about this article?
Yeah, I think you have to appreciate the relationship. It was interesting to see. It definitely makes sense that you're going to try to find the motion from somewhere where it's comfortable, and how that's going to, long-term and impact your performance. I think is huge. So, if you're having one of these athletes that has a known shoulder issue, you're teasing out, appreciating what structures are involved, and then looking where the compensations may be, you might be able to better devise a plan of care there to address the deficits from becoming larger issues, or even contain what you have at that point. So I thought it was neat to look at.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like, to jump off topic a little bit here, when somebody has a spinal fusion, they're much more prone to developing injuries at the levels directly above and below, just because you're not necessarily losing a ton of range of motion, unless we're talking cervical spine. That would be a little bit different. But usually in the lumbar spine, you're going to get back to your range of motion, or a high percentage of that. But it's because those levels above and below are going to be moving a little bit more to compensate for that loss at the level that was used. So you can imagine, if you're going to lose 5 degrees of external rotation, well, you might be rotating a little bit more, or even coming down a little bit harder to get that whip. And then you're putting more stress on that, whether it's the thoracic spine, the shoulder, or even the elbow. So your body finds the path of least resistance. And that's kind of, if you're not trained appropriately, that's where the injury could come next. So although this isn't clinically significant, I think it does kind of open up your eyes to looking at a whole body perspective and making sure everything's prime and not at a huge risk for injury, which, without going into a whole tangent, would be why it's probably less beneficial for you to be a one sport athlete, than multi-sport athlete when you're that young.
Sure, absolutely. Many good reasons not to specialize at that young age.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, Steve. So we got through the 3 articles I wanted to touch on. I think we, as best we could, just looking at the abstracts. Like I said, next time we'll read through a whole article and touch on those and answer any questions. But any final comments on these 3 articles?
I just, obviously I enjoyed them from a baseball perspective, but look forward to kind of diving in and hopefully fostering some good conversations and synthesize some new information, see how we can help people. So,
absolutely. Any thoughts on the postponement of the MLB season?
It's hard. A lot of people are dealing with a lot of hard things. I sure do miss baseball. I liked Manfred's address. I do think baseball will heal us. Hopefully bring us out of this together. Yeah.
Do you think the first games will have any fans in the stands?
I don't know. That's going to be pretty eerie if not, but safety obviously at the forefront of everybody's mind. So I think they agreed on, there are a few conditions as far as when they'll start back up, the union and MLB. So I've been reading every day looking for new news, but just hope everybody get well so we can get back to life again.
Absolutely. And if you're bored at home, whether it's furloughed or laid off, then we're going to start pumping out more of these article reviews. Steve and I are doing this first one-on-one, but we have other new faces that will show up in the near future. So please like and subscribe below. In the future, comment with any questions, and we will do our best to answer those and progress our profession of physical therapy.
There it is.
Because we don't want this to turn into telehealth.
That's right.
All right. Steve, thanks very much for hopping on, and we'll talk soon. All
right. Sounds good, buddy.
Thanks. Bye.